At Harvard, the university now says it will move towards, quote, institutional neutrality.
Fauci wasn't a big player in my administration.
China is almost single-handedly saving the planet.
Harvard rejects woke virtue signaling, Trump tells a bold-faced lie, California's latest plan to address the homelessness crisis fails spectacularly, and a communist TikToker simps for China in a truly bizarre way. All that and so much more is coming up on today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my daily series where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet and from across our politics from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and sticking around. And if you're a returning viewer, you know what I'm going to say. Don't forget to hit that like button and do comment with your thoughts as we go along. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Anyway, on to our main topic for today. Is there anything more annoying than when institutions, organizations do this kind of cringe, empty virtue signaling, putting out statements about things they really have nothing to do with and have no actual actions or plans to do anything about, but just want to signal how socially aware they are and how progressive they are? Okay, I can think of a few things that are more annoying than that.
Today's pronoun of the day is cray, crayon, crayons.
But it's still pretty bad. Yet thankfully, the tide might be turning against this cringe virtue signaling if news out of Harvard is anything to go by. The prestigious college just announced that it is adopting a policy of institutional neutrality, meaning it won't take official positions as an institution on hot-button social issues anymore that have nothing to do with the purpose of the university. Here's some local news coverage from CBS Boston.
Well, after months of turmoil at Harvard, the university now says it will move towards, quote, institutional neutrality. Essentially, it will stop issuing public statements on hot-button issues. As WBZ political analyst John Keller shows us, some tied to the university think this is the right move.
It's a place for research and debate. It is not a place for proclamations. If you want proclamations, go to the Vatican.
Harvard alumnus and critic Harvey Silverglade applauds the university's decision to stop weighing in as an institution on current affairs.
A policy of institutional neutrality will help restore open and honest discourse on campus and reduce self-censorship.
It's a practice that started in the mid-'60s at the University of Chicago. It didn't bring an end to unrest on that campus, as this recent video shows. And the co-chair of the group recommending this policy says it might not have eased any of Harvard's recent turmoil.
This is going to take a culture change, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take reinforcement. And I think it will be tough for what people are going to expect statements.
I, for one, am glad that Harvard will no longer be putting out random statements on unrelated issues or celebrating pan-romantic, two-spirited bisexual day or whatever. I'm sick of all the virtue signaling backed up by zero action from these groups and places that just want to show how good and tolerant and open-minded they are while actually sacrificing and doing nothing. But more importantly than just sparing us some cringe, this is actually a win for free speech. Because when institutions that are supposed to be open places of learning and dialogue take official positions on hot-button issues, it stifles and chills dissenting minority viewpoints. That's why the Nonpartisan Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, which is the nation's premier free speech organization, is celebrating this move. Disclaimer, I do some paid consulting for FIRE. FIRE has long advocated in favor of colleges adopting a position of institutional neutrality, and here's why. They say that a college should host critics, not become the critic itself. When colleges take positions on social and political issues, they put their thumb on the scale in debates that are better left to faculty and students. And when colleges take positions on social and political issues, they chill the expression of students and faculty who might dissent from those positions. They point out that students and faculty may self-censor for fear of facing disciplinary action for disagreeing with the prevailing views, and this concern is not abstract. FIRE has seen countless examples of students and faculty reported to their colleges for protected speech, after which administrators frequently launch disciplinary investigations. The threat of investigation, even one that resolves in the dissenter's favor, is often enough to stop students and faculty from speaking out in the future. There's also the threat that these official policies from a university can create a hostile social climate for people with minority viewpoints. When colleges and universities take positions on social or political issues, they send the signal that the position represents a value of the institution and that those who dissent from the position do not represent the college's values. As a result, these statements discourage dissent from these positions, whether official sanction over dissent is explicitly threatened or not. Fire goes on to point out that these policies are also a threat to academic freedom, particularly for professors and faculty who don't have tenure. Non-tenured faculty, whose contracts Fire frequently sees universities decide not to renew if they engage in speech that administrators dislike, face heightened risk. When faculty in these vulnerable roles know administrators disagree with their views, they are more likely to self-censor than to risk losing their jobs or jeopardizing future opportunities. So I think this is great news. We're basically losing out on nothing because these statements never accomplished anything or involved any action backing them up. They were almost always just empty virtue signaling. Yet we are promoting a culture of openness and freedom of expression and academic freedom. It's a win-win, if you ask me. And hopefully, like is often the case, other colleges will look to Harvard doing this and follow their lead. So I think this is some pretty darn good news. But that's just my take. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you went to a college that put out cringe virtue signaling statements, I know I sure did. Up next, we've got to talk about Donald Trump because the former president just told a lie so blatant that I can't let it slide. In an interview with the YouTuber Tim Pool, Trump tried to claim that Dr. Fauci wasn't very involved with his administration's handling of the pandemic. Take a listen.
Fauci wasn't a big player in my administration like he was after I left. I mean, Biden made him the king of everything. And if you take a look at that, Fauci was not the big player with me that he was. And in fact, I did things that he didn't want to do.
This is a lie. It's a blatant attempt to gaslight us and rewrite history. Trump absolutely made Dr. Fauci a huge part of his response to the pandemic, appointing him to the highly influential White House Coronavirus Task Force. He praised Dr. Fauci again and again as president.
Dr. Fauci is great.
No, he's a good man. I like Dr. Fauci a lot, just so you understand. He was a great basketball player. Did anybody know that? A couple of years ago, but a few years ago. The head never changes. The attitude never changes. So I have great respect for this group. In fact, I told Tony Fauci, I said, why don't you move to New York, run against AOC, you will win easily.
And at an April 13th press briefing, Trump was asked why he retweeted a call to fire Fauci.
Today I walk in, I hear I'm going to fire him. I'm not firing him. I think he's a wonderful guy.
Tweet something that said fire Fauci. Why did you
fire Fauci?
I retweeted somebody. I don't know. They said fire. Doesn't matter. I was immediately called upon that. And I said, no, I like him. I think he's terrific.
And worked with him very closely on everything from recommendations that people wear cloth masks. How did that one age, Donnie? To Operation Warp Speed, where they developed the vaccine. Trump appointed Fauci to a key role in that operation. It's true that Trump didn't do everything that Fauci said, but he kept him in place and refused calls to fire him, even as Republicans lost faith in Dr. Fauci because of his repeated duplicity and misdirections. In fact, Trump even awarded Dr. Fauci an official award, a presidential commendation, at the end of his term in office. So for him to now claim that he just never really listened to Fauci wasn't a big player, is not true. It's not honest, and it's an insult to the intelligence of his supporters and his critics alike. I understand that the pandemic was a totally unforeseen situation and that a lot of our leaders made mistakes or learned as they went and evolved on certain things, and I have a certain degree of grace that they didn't get everything right. But what I will not stand for is this historical revisionism, this attempt to gaslight us and tell us that what happened didn't actually happen. We've seen this from people like Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, who we talked about on this show, who bizarrely claimed that all his lockdowns and his orders in New York were voluntary, even though people literally were arrested and fined for not complying. The math isn't mathing. If Trump wanted to just come out and say, I was wrong to promote Dr. Fauci and to listen to him, I made a mistake, I won't do it again. Okay, fair enough. I wouldn't really be talking about it. I'd be like, whatever. But I won't stand for gaslighting and lies. I just won't. Yes, lying is just what politicians do. I'm going to call bullshit on it, whether it's coming from the left or the right. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Does your memory of the pandemic conflict with how Trump told it to Tim Pool? I'm curious for you to let me know what you think in the comments. And now, California's latest attempt to address its homelessness crisis is failing spectacularly, in a twist that should surprise absolutely no one who's paying attention. Sorry, I got interrupted because Reggie wanted me to hold him. Spoiled bitch. So basically, Governor Gavin Newsom last year in March of 2023 announced this big plan to purchase 1,200 mini homes. But a new investigation from the nonpartisan nonprofit Cal Matters shows that a year later, 0 of the homes have been put in place, and barely any have even been purchased or ordered. Millions and millions of taxpayer dollars put to great use once again. Let's go to some local news coverage from ABC 10 to see what's going down.
You want to see progress and you want to see it now.
In March of 2023, Governor Gavin Newsom announced a plan to give 4 cities sleeping cabins totaling 1,200 beds, 500 to Los Angeles, 200 to San Jose, 150 to San Diego County, and 350 to Sacramento. But more than a year later, not a single one is even installed, let alone providing transitional housing to the homeless population they're meant to serve. That's according to an investigation by the nonpartisan nonprofit news organization Cal Matters. Of the 1,200 promised beds, only 155 sleeping cabins have been purchased so far. Some of them are double occupancy, so that makes a total of 175 beds, and they're going on this site, with delivery expected to begin in June. A spokesperson for the Department of General Services tells ABC 10 focusing solely on timelines diminishes the hard work of numerous individuals dedicating to providing much-needed housing.
Oh, well, we wouldn't want to diminish the hard work of the government officials who, a year later, have accomplished absolutely nothing. The horror. We wouldn't want to do that. Excuse me? This is actually really sad. I mean, my heart goes out to the homeless, and it's one of those issues that I don't see a clear-cut solution for. But stories like this, they just add to a long list of instances and places where progressive politicians have tried simply throwing the money, just throwing taxpayer money at it like candy on Halloween, and it doesn't work. It simply does not go well. Once again, guys, and I hate repeating this, but the government isn't good at doing things. So I don't know how we solve the homelessness crisis. I really don't. I think we need civil society to step up, our churches, our charities, our nonprofits. I think part of it is going to be addressing mental health and substance abuse issues, but we can't keep waiting on the government to save the day or just throwing millions and millions more of taxpayer dollars at this problem and hoping that's going to fix something. That strategy doesn't work. And if you don't believe me, just look at California. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you've heard any interesting other ideas of what we can do to address this very real problem in America. And now, say goodbye to Reggie. I'm going to put him back in his bed on the ground, and we'll move into our next segment. Say bye to all the cool people who watch Brad versus everyone, Reggie. Bye. All right, up next, it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas going viral on the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, a communist TikToker is openly simping for China and doing propaganda for the CCP in a way that's blatant and bizarre, even by TikTok standards. Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button as we go along, and now let's check out this video.
I used to get pretty depressed about climate change until I did some research and found out that China is almost single-handedly saving the planet. China just tripled their new solar energy production in 1 year. At just 17% of the world's population, China is now home to 80% of the world's solar production. They produce a third of all renewable energy, 3 times more than the United States, who is now producing more crude oil than any country in human history. Meanwhile, Tesla, one of the biggest companies in the United States, manufactures over half of their cars in China. So they're responsible for our production too. And the EU just hit China's biggest EV company with a 13-month audit to make sure that the government hasn't been unfairly helping the company develop its technology. We can't have governments helping to develop technology to save our planet from destruction, guys, because markets. But by doing that, the EU is admitting that socialist economies have an advantage, yet they're the ones saying that socialism can never work. Do you see how ironic it is that these capitalist countries have to use their governments to keep their failing industries alive because they can't compete with China on a free market? Gotta save the corporations at the expense of the consumer and the planet. When I visited Shenzhen, the streets were covered with a brand new fleet of electric taxis. The entire world needs to follow China's rapid pace if we want to prevent rising sea levels, massive crop failures, and extreme natural disasters that a few degrees of warming can cause.
There's so much here. So first, I want to point something out that he does acknowledge later in the video, but that just totally makes the first multi-minute spiel here seem irrelevant and incorrect. Here's the graph for total CO2 emissions by country and region. China is #1 for global carbon emissions, and it is not even close. They're also not actually making progress. They've gone up over time. While you can see over the last 20 years, the United States has decreased its emissions slightly, China has only increased, especially over the last 10, 15 years. They're also responsible for 95% of new coal energy, coal-fired plants. They're one of the only places actually increasing and expanding one of the most polluting forms of energy production. To be fair, part of the reason that China has massive carbon emissions is because they have an enormous population. And when you look at it at a per capita level, they're still really high, but they're not the highest in the world. The United States is higher on a per capita level. But that's partly just because we're a lot richer, and richer countries tend to consume more, which means more emissions. And China's per capita emissions are still much higher than other places like the United Kingdom or the European Union. So again, the idea that they're saving the world from climate change is bizarre propaganda with no basis in fact. And I'm really curious if during his tour of China that the government presumably may have taken him on, I don't know, whether he visited the region where the Uyghur people are being genocided, or whether he visited Hong Kong and documented any of the widespread human rights and civil liberties violations going down there. No? No? I must have missed that video in his feed. I'm sure he posted it. Also, the part where he says that China and the US can't compete and the government has to block them because they can't compete on a market because socialism works and they have an economic advantage. Well, one, most of China's economic progress in recent decades has come from them embracing market reforms. They're still obviously have a huge government and a very government-involved economy, but they've become more market-based, not less, and that's what's corresponded with their big increase in economic output. And two, you cannot actually say that what the United States and what the European Union are doing when it comes to green energy and stuff is free market policy. Really, is that what a free market is? When you spend trillions of dollars on corrupt green energy subsidies while simultaneously outlawing in most places and in most forms zero emissions forms of energy like nuclear power? The math isn't mathing for me, babe, at all. I wonder if he actually believes this, like if he's actually drank all this pro-China Kool-Aid. To be clear, I'm not somebody who thinks like America is perfect and China's horrible in every way. Like, I'm sure they do have many things that they're doing differently in better ways than us, and our country is messed up in its own ways, in a lot of ways. But I'll never forget when I met and I became actually good friends with a student who came to my university, the University of Massachusetts. Her name was Victoria, or at least that was the Americanized name she went by. And when she came here from China, and actually remember, she was like part of the upper crust of Chinese society. Poor people or lower middle class or working class people don't get to come to America for college. It's the elite of China's society who can sometimes come here as international students, which is what she was. I'll never forget when we went to a gas station together and she was just stunned at the options of how many candy bars there were. She told me they only had two where she was from, two kinds to choose from. And her jaw dropped when she learned that everyday people were allowed to own guns in America. She was shook, like stunned, and said, "That's awesome." But the most disturbing thing she told me was that even having left the country, she had to be very careful what she posted online, because if she posted anything critical of the Chinese government, her family back home could be arrested. So look, our country is not perfect, not even close, but it frustrates me. It really does when I see these young Americans take so many things we have here for granted and shill in misleading and propagandistic ways for genuinely authoritarian nations. But that's sadly par for the course for TikTok. Let me know what you thought of that video in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button. Now, before we wrap up today's show, I'll read a few of your comments that you left on the last episode. One person says, I know, right? Making fun of fat people at the gym is like making fun of sick people at the hospital. Another messed up thing is to consider that the people who behave that way are most likely the same people who say things like, try exercising for once. That kind of behavior does not fly at my gym. Memberships have been revoked, and rightly so. Yeah, good for you and good for the gym. I can't stand people who bully or belittle others who are trying to better themselves. That's one of the things I'm all about, is individual responsibility and personal responsibility and accountability and self-improvement. People who are taking steps in the right direction and doing their best should be applauded, not mocked or bullied. And I think anyone who's doing them mocking or bullying in that situation is projecting their own insecurities. Another person says, why do people want to get on the plane early anyway? I always try to be last so I don't have to sit there as long. That's a good question, because I feel similarly. It's a little different on the airlines where there's no assigned seating, where you want to get a good seat or get seats together with your family or your husband or your wife or whatever. I kind of get that. But on the flights where there's assigned seating, why do people still want to board first? Maybe it's just because I'm a little ADHD or whatever and I have trouble sitting still, but I don't want to spend more time crunched up in that seat. My boyfriend does, though. He always wants to squirrel and get on board and be one of the first ones on, and I don't understand it. Another person said, Brad sipping his tea was pure perfection. Brad, I've changed my daily routine. Because of you, I now wake up 30 minutes earlier so I can fit you in before the gym. Well, it's actually iced coffee, not tea, but thank you. And that is so great. I'm so happy that you do that. Rest in peace to your extra 30 minutes of sleep. Thanks for tuning in, and good for you for hitting the gym and staying healthy. Another person says, Brad's out here looking like an old Hollywood movie star. You are too kind, and I did get a lot of comments on the shirt I wore yesterday. It is a little bit of a throwback or a retro look, but all wardrobe compliments or complaints can't really be taken up with me. They need to be taken up with my boyfriend, because since we met, he's basically redone my entire wardrobe. At first, the ugly, ratty old things that I used to regularly wear would just start disappearing slowly and one by one, and he would buy me new things or help me pick out new things. Then somewhere along the line, he stopped being subtle about it and is just like, yeah, I'm getting rid of all this ugly stuff. And I like it. I mean, I've been fine with it and the change. I'm not really like a style or fashion person, but he's given me good advice and made me look better, so I'll take it. All right, everybody, that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. Please hit that like button before you go and comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.